Elias Carter's heart shattered the night his father's voice sliced through the phone. Cold as steel, "You're no son of mine." At 19, he'd mustered the courage to come out as gay, only to be met with silence, then venom, from the man who'd raised him in their small Alabama town. By morning, he was on a bus to New York City, carrying nothing but a backpack, a bruised spirit, and a vow to never look back. The city hit him like a tidal wave. Times Square's neon chaos buzzed with possibility, but the streets were unkind to a young black man with no plan. Elias slept in shelters, scraped by on odd jobs, and learned fast that survival demanded grit. Yet, even in his darkest moments, huddled in a subway station, stomach growling, he clung to a flicker of hope. He'd build a life where he could be himself, unapologetically. Years later, at 32, Elias had carved out a modest existence in Brooklyn. He worked as a barista at a cozy coffee shop called The Haven, where the scent of roasted beans mingled with the hum of conversation. His warm smile and knack for remembering customers' orders made him a favorite, but his heart yearned for more, a family, a purpose beyond pouring lattes. The rejection from his past still stung, a quiet ache that surfaced in the stillness of night. He dated, but love felt elusive, like a song he could hear but never sing. One autumn evening, as leaves crunched underfoot in Prospect Park, Elias met Julian Morales. Julian, 29, was a social worker with a soft voice and eyes that held stories of their own. He'd grown up in the Bronx, raised by a single mother who'd taught him to fight for the underdog. Julian's work at a foster care agency consumed him, each case a reminder of the kids society overlooked. He was Latino, with a lean build and hair that fell messily over his forehead. And when he smiled at Elias during a community cleanup event, something in Elias's chest stirred, a spark he hadn't felt in years. Their first conversation was easy, like slipping into a favorite jacket. Julian teased Elias about his overzealous leaf raking, and Elias shot back with a grin. "Not all of us can save the world one kid at a time." They exchanged numbers, and soon, texts turned into late-night calls, then walks through the city that stretched into dawn. Julian's passion for his work captivated Elias, but so did his vulnerability. How he'd pause mid-sentence, as if weighing whether to share the weight of his world. By winter, they were inseparable. Elias loved how Julian's laugh could light up a room, how he'd hum old salsa tunes while cooking. But Julian carried a burden. The kids he worked with, especially the ones labeled unadoptable, haunted him. One night, over takeout in Julian's tiny apartment, he told Elias about Maya, a 12-year-old girl who'd been in foster care since she was 6. "She's tough as nails," Julian said, his voice thick. "But no one sees her. They see her file, behavior issues, trauma, and they walk away." Elias listened, his heart twisting. He knew what it felt like to be unseen, to be discarded for being different. "What if we didn't walk away?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Julian's eyes widened, but a smile tugged at his lips. It was the first time they'd spoken of "we" in a way that felt bigger than themselves. Their relationship deepened, but so did the challenges. Julian's job was a constant emotional drain, and Elias wrestled with his own insecurities. Could he be enough for someone like Julian, who gave so much to others? One night, after a heated argument about Julian's long hours, Elias stormed out, only to return hours later, soaked from the rain. "I'm scared," he admitted, standing in Julian's doorway. "Scared I'll lose you. Scared I'm not enough." Julian pulled him close, whispering, "You're more than enough. You're my home." That moment cemented something unbreakable between them. They began to dream together, not just of love, but of a family. Julian introduced Elias to the foster care system, and Elias, hesitant at first, felt a pull toward the kids Julian fought for. They attended training sessions, their hands clasped under the table, learning about trauma, attachment, and the bureaucracy of adoption. Elias was nervous but determined. He'd been rejected once. He wouldn't let fear stop him from giving someone else a chance. By spring, they were approved as foster parents. Their first placement was Maya, the girl Julian had spoken of. She arrived at their apartment with a single backpack, her dark eyes wary, her braids tight against her scalp. At 12, she was small for her age but carried herself like someone twice as old. "This won't last," she said flatly, dropping her bag by the door. Elias saw himself in her defiance, her guarded heart. He didn't push, but he made her pancakes the next morning, leaving a smiley face in whipped cream. She didn't smile, but she ate every bite. Building trust with Maya was slow, like coaxing a bird to land. She tested them, sneaking out, snapping at Julian, hiding food under her bed. But Elias and Julian were patient. They took her to museums, played board games, and listened when she finally spoke about her past. Parents lost to addiction, homes that never felt like home. One night, when Maya had a nightmare, Elias sat by her bed, telling her stories of his own childhood until she fell back asleep. Julian watched from the doorway, his heart swelling. Their life wasn't perfect. Elias's co-workers whispered about his unconventional family, and Julian faced pushback from a supervisor who questioned whether two men could handle a difficult child. But they pushed forward, driven by love and a shared belief that everyone deserved a chance to belong. Maya began to soften, her laughter filling their apartment, her drawings covering the fridge. Elias felt a purpose he'd never known, a sense of family that healed the wounds of his past. As summer bloomed, they faced a new challenge. Maya's biological aunt resurfaced, wanting custody. The news hit like a punch. Elias and Julian had grown to love Maya like their own, but the system favored biological family. They spent sleepless nights preparing for court, grappling with the fear of losing her. Elias, who'd once been cast out for being himself, now stood to lose the family he'd built because of rules that didn't see their bond. In the courtroom, Maya's voice was small but clear. "I want to stay with Elias and Julian," she said, her eyes fixed on the judge. "They're my dads." The word dads hit Elias like a wave, tears blurring his vision. Julian squeezed his hand, their fingers interlocking. The judge's decision loomed, a moment that would define their future. The courtroom was a sterile cage, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the faces of everyone inside. Elias sat rigid, his palms sweating, as the judge reviewed Maya's case file. Julian's hand rested on his knee, a quiet anchor, but the air felt thick with uncertainty. They'd spent weeks preparing, gathering letters from Maya's teachers, therapists, and neighbors, all testifying to the stability they'd given her. But the aunt, Carla, sat across the room, her expression unreadable. She was Maya's only living relative, a woman in her late 30s who'd been absent for years, but now claimed she was ready to step up. Elias's mind raced back to the moment he'd first held Maya's hand, walking her to school. She'd been so guarded, her small fingers stiff in his grip, but over months, that grip had softened. Now, the thought of losing her felt like losing a piece of himself. Julian leaned in, whispering, "We've done everything we can. She knows we love her." But Elias couldn't shake the fear that love might not be enough against the weight of biology. Carla's lawyer argued that family ties should take precedence, painting her as a reformed woman eager to reconnect. Elias and Julian's lawyer countered, emphasizing the bond they'd built with Maya, her progress in school, her newfound trust. Maya sat between them, her face a mask of stoicism, but Elias caught the way her fingers twisted the hem of her shirt, a nervous habit he'd come to recognize. When the judge asked her to speak, the room held its breath. "I don't know Carla," Maya said, her voice steady but soft. She wasn't there when I needed someone. Elias and Julian were. They're my family. The word family hung in the air, raw and powerful. Elias felt his throat tighten, his eyes burning. Julian's grip on his hand tightened. A silent promise they'd face whatever came next together. The judge adjourned for deliberation, leaving them in limbo. They took Maya for ice cream, trying to keep things light, but the weight of the unknown pressed down. Maya, usually chatty, was quiet, her spoon scraping the bottom of her sundae cup. "If I have to go with her, will you still visit me?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the table. Elias's heart broke. "We'll never stop fighting for you," he said, his voice thick. Julian nodded, adding, "You're stuck with us, kid." Days later, the judge's ruling came. Maya would stay with Elias and Julian, with supervised visits for Carla. It wasn't a perfect victory. Carla's presence lingered as a reminder of fragility, but it was enough. They celebrated quietly, cooking Maya's favorite tacos and dancing to her favorite pop songs in their living room. For the first time, Elias felt like a father, not just a foster parent. Julian, watching Maya laugh, whispered to Elias, "We're building something real." But life didn't pause for their joy. Julian's work grew more demanding, with new cases piling up. One child, a 15-year-old boy named Theo, caught his attention. Theo was a runaway, openly queer, and had bounced between homes, rejected for his identity. Julian saw echoes of Elias's past in him, and when he brought Theo's file home, Elias didn't hesitate. "Let's meet him," he said, his voice firm. Julian smiled, knowing Elias's heart was already opening. Theo arrived with a scowl and a duffel bag, his blonde hair dyed blue at the tips, his 15-year-old frame all sharp edges and defiance. He was white, with pale skin and green eyes that darted suspiciously. "This is temporary," he muttered, slumping onto their couch. Elias recognized that armor. He'd worn it himself at that age. Julian, ever patient, gave Theo space, while Elias tried to connect through small gestures, leaving a comic book on Theo's bed, asking about his music. Slowly, Theo began to talk, sharing stories of rejection from his conservative family in Ohio, of nights spent on the streets. One evening, Theo overheard Elias and Julian arguing about finances. The cost of caring for two kids was stretching them thin, and Elias worried they'd taken on too much. "Maybe we're not ready for this," Elias said, his voice low. Theo, lurking in the hallway, snapped, "If I'm a burden, I'll leave." Elias froze, realizing how his words had landed. He found Theo packing his bag and sat beside him. "You're not a burden," Elias said. "You're family. We're figuring this out together." Theo didn't reply, but he stopped packing. Maya and Theo clashed at first, their strong personalities sparking tension. Maya, protective of her place, saw Theo as an intruder. Theo, used to fending for himself, pushed back. But Julian and Elias mediated, teaching them to communicate. One night, during a power outage, they all ended up playing cards by candlelight, laughter breaking through the dark. Elias watched Maya teach Theo how to bluff, and for a moment he saw the family they could become. Yet challenges loomed. Carla filed an appeal, claiming the judge had overlooked her rights. The threat of losing Maya resurfaced, and Theo's trust remained fragile, his fear of rejection a constant undercurrent. Elias and Julian leaned on each other, their love a steady force against the storm. They began to dream of adoption, not just fostering, but the process was daunting. Legal hurdles, societal bias, and their own doubts about whether they could be enough. One night, as they lay in bed, Julian traced circles on Elias's back. "Do you ever think about your dad?" he asked. Elias tensed, the old wound opening. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I wonder if he'd care now, seeing what we've built." Julian kissed his forehead. You're not proving anything to him. You're proving it to yourself. Elias nodded, feeling the truth settle in. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was creating a legacy of love. The appeal hearing loomed like a storm cloud. Carla's lawyer argued she'd stabilized her life. A new job, a steady apartment, and deserved a chance to raise Maya. Elias and Julian sat in the courtroom, their hands clasped, as Maya testified again. This time, her voice shook. "I don't want to start over," she said, tears spilling. "Elias and Julian are my home." The judge's face softened, but the decision was delayed, leaving them in agonizing suspense. Back home, Theo's walls began to crack. He started joining family dinners, his sarcasm softening into humor. One day, he showed Elias a sketch he'd drawn, a vibrant cityscape with two figures holding hands, unmistakably Elias and Julian. "It's you guys?" Theo mumbled, embarrassed. Elias hung it on the fridge, his chest tight with pride. But Theo's past still haunted him. At school, he faced bullying for being openly queer, and one afternoon, he came home with a bruised cheek. "They called me a freak," he said, his voice hollow. Elias, furious, wanted to storm the school, but Julian calmed him. They sat with Theo, teaching him to stand tall, to know his worth wasn't defined by others' hate. Elias saw his younger self in Theo's pain. He shared his own story, his father's rejection, the years of feeling less than. "You're not a freak," Elias told him. "You're enough exactly as you are." Theo's eyes glistened, and for the first time, he hugged Elias. A quick, awkward embrace that said more than words. Meanwhile, Maya's confidence grew. She joined the school art club, her drawings winning praise. But the uncertainty of the appeal weighed on her. One night, she asked Julian, "What if I have to leave?" Julian knelt beside her, his voice steady. "We'll fight for you, Maya. Always." She nodded, but her eyes held fear. Elias and Julian doubled down, meeting with lawyers, gathering more evidence of their bond with Maya. They also began the adoption process for Theo, determined to give him permanence. The community rallied around them. The Haven's regulars organized a fundraiser to help with legal fees, and Maya's art teacher wrote a glowing letter about her progress. But prejudice lingered. A neighbor left a note on their door. "Kids need a mom and dad." Elias crumpled it, his anger flaring, but Julian reminded him, "We're showing them what family really means." As the appeal hearing approached, Elias and Julian took the kids to Coney Island for a day of escape. Maya laughed on the carousel, her braids flying, while Theo won a stuffed shark at a game booth. Elias and Julian stole a moment by the boardwalk, the ocean stretching before them. "We're doing this," Julian said, his hand in Elias's. "No matter what, we're a family." Elias nodded, his heart full but heavy. The hearing arrived, and the courtroom felt like a battlefield. Carla's lawyer painted Elias and Julian as unfit, citing their lifestyle and the challenges of raising troubled kids. Elias's blood boiled, but he stayed composed, his eyes on Maya. Their lawyer presented a strong case. Maya's improved grades, her therapy reports, the home they'd built. The judge's ruling came swiftly this time. Maya would remain with Elias and Julian, with no further appeals allowed. Relief washed over them, but Carla's tears as she left the courtroom lingered in Elias's mind. He wondered if she, too, was searching for redemption. That night, they celebrated with pizza and music, Maya and Theo bickering over toppings like siblings. Elias watched them, his heart swelling. He'd been rejected for who he was, but now he was the anchor for two kids the world had overlooked. Julian caught his eye, and they shared a look that held years of struggle and love. But their journey wasn't over. Theo's adoption process hit a snag. His biological parents, estranged for years, resurfaced, contesting the termination of their rights. The news shook Theo, who'd begun to trust in his new home. "Why do they want me now?" he asked, his voice breaking. Elias and Julian had no easy answers, but they promised to fight for him, just as they had for Maya. They hired a new lawyer, dipping into savings they didn't have. The stress tested their relationship. One night, Elias snapped at Julian over a forgotten bill, and the argument spiraled. "We can't keep doing this," Elias said, exhausted. Julian's eyes flashed. "You think I'm not tired? I'm in this with you, Elias. Don't push me away." They stood in silence, then fell into each other's arms, the weight of their shared dream pulling them back together. Through it all, the kids grounded them. Maya started calling them Dad and Poppy, small words that carried immense weight. Theo, still guarded, began opening up, sharing his love for music. Elias bought him a second-hand guitar, and the sound of his strumming filled their home. They were building something unbreakable, but the fight for Theo's future loomed, a reminder that love alone couldn't conquer every obstacle. The battle for Theo's adoption was a marathon, not a sprint. His biological parents, now living in Pennsylvania, claimed they'd changed, but their history of neglect and their discomfort with Theo's queerness cast doubt. Elias and Julian met with their lawyer weekly, compiling evidence of Theo's stability with them, his improved grades, his therapy sessions, his growing confidence. But the process drained them emotionally and financially. Elias picked up extra shifts at the Haven, while Julian worked late, balancing his caseload and their family's needs. Theo sensed the tension. One night, he overheard Elias on the phone, discussing legal fees. "If I'm costing you too much, I can go," Theo said, his voice sharp but trembling. Elias knelt before him, his hands on Theo's shoulders. "You're worth every penny, every fight. You're our son." Theo's eyes softened, but doubt lingered. He started withdrawing again, skipping meals, spending hours alone with his guitar. Maya, now 13, became their unexpected ally. She'd grown fierce in her love for her family, and she saw Theo's struggle. One evening, she dragged him to the kitchen table, where she'd set up a makeshift art project. "We're making a family tree," she declared, handing him markers. Theo rolled his eyes but joined in, drawing branches for Elias, Julian, and themselves. When he added a leaf for Theo Carter Morales, Elias's breath caught. It was the first time Theo had claimed their name. The community continued to support them. The Haven hosted a talent show, and Maya and Theo performed, a duet of Maya's poetry and Theo's guitar. The crowd cheered, and for a moment, the weight of the world lifted. But the legal battle pressed on. Theo's parents hired a lawyer, arguing they deserved a second chance. Elias and Julian faced scrutiny, their relationship dissected in court documents. "Two men raising a queer kid?" one social worker muttered during a home visit. Julian's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm, knowing any outburst could jeopardize their case. One night, Elias found Julian crying in their bedroom, a rare crack in his strength. "What if we lose him?" Julian whispered. Elias held him, his own fears bubbling up. "We won't," he said, though he wasn't sure. They clung to each other, their love a lifeline. The next day, they took the kids to Central Park, needing a break. Maya and Theo raced through the grass, their laughter a reminder of why they fought. Elias and Julian sat on a bench, hands entwined, watching their kids. "This is what matters," Julian said. Elias nodded, his resolve hardening. The adoption hearing arrived, a tense affair in a Manhattan courthouse. Theo's parents sat stiffly, their faces a mix of guilt and defiance. Theo, dressed in a button-up Elias had ironed, spoke softly but firmly. "I don't want to go back," he said. "Elias and Julian are my dads. They see me." His words echoed Maya's from months before, and Elias felt a surge of pride. Their lawyer presented a compelling case, but the judge's face was unreadable. Days later, the ruling came. Theo's parents' rights were terminated, clearing the way for adoption. Elias and Julian wept, hugging Theo so tightly he squirmed. Maya joined in, laughing, "You're stuck with us now." The victory was sweet, but it came at a cost. Their savings were gone, and the scrutiny they'd faced left scars. Elias wondered if the world would ever fully accept their family, but he pushed the thought aside. They had each other. With both kids secure, Elias and Julian began to dream bigger. They talked about moving to a bigger apartment, maybe fostering more kids. But reality grounded them. Julian's job was at risk. Budget cuts threatened his agency, and Elias's hours at the Haven weren't enough to cover their growing expenses. They faced a choice: play it safe or keep building their family despite the odds. One evening, Julian came home with a file for a new foster child, a 10-year-old girl named Aisha. "She's been through hell," Julian said, his voice heavy. Aisha was black, like Elias, and had been in the system since she was 4. Her file listed severe trust issues, but Julian saw potential. Elias hesitated, the weight of their struggles fresh, but Maya and Theo overheard. "We can help her," Maya said, and Theo nodded. Elias looked at Julian, seeing the same fire that had drawn him in years ago. "Okay," Elias said. "Let's meet her." Aisha arrived, small and silent, her eyes scanning the apartment like a cornered animal. She was wary of Elias and Julian, but Maya took her under her wing, showing her the family tree they'd made. Theo played her a song on his guitar, and slowly, Aisha's shoulders relaxed. Elias and Julian watched, knowing the road ahead would be hard but worth it. As fall turned to winter, their apartment buzzed with life. Aisha began to smile, her laughter joining Maya's and Theo's. Elias and Julian faced new challenges: school meetings, therapy sessions, and whispers from neighbors, but they faced them together. Elias thought of his father, the man who'd rejected him. He didn't need his approval anymore. He'd built a family not just for himself, but for kids the world had forgotten. Winter settled over Brooklyn, blanketing their apartment in quiet snow. Elias stood at the window, watching Aisha and Maya build a lopsided snowman in the courtyard below, their giggles rising like music. Theo strummed his guitar inside, practicing a song for Aisha's upcoming school talent show. Julian joined Elias, slipping an arm around his waist. "We're doing okay, aren't we?" Julian asked, his breath warm against Elias's cheek. Elias nodded, his heart full. They'd fought for this. Every laugh, every moment of peace. Aisha's integration wasn't easy. At 10, she carried scars from years of instability. She hoarded food, flinched at loud noises, and woke screaming from nightmares. Elias and Julian took turns sitting by her bed, their voices soft, their presence steady. Maya, now a confident 13, became Aisha's shadow, teaching her to braid her hair, sharing her art supplies. Theo, 16, was quieter but protective, slipping Aisha his favorite comics when she seemed sad. Their family was a patchwork, stitched together by choice and love. But the world outside their door remained unforgiving. Julian's agency lost funding, forcing him to take a lower-paying job at a nonprofit. Elias worked double shifts, his body aching, but he never complained. They cut corners, skipped date nights, and leaned on the community. The Haven's owner slipped them free coffee, and Maya's art teacher offered free lessons for Aisha. Still, the bills piled up, and the fear of falling short gnawed at Elias. He confided in Julian one night, his voice low. "What if we can't give them everything they need?" Julian took his hand. "We're giving them us. That's enough." The adoption process for Aisha began, another uphill climb. Her caseworker was supportive, but the system was slow, tangled in red tape. Elias and Julian balanced court dates with school events, cheering at Maya's art shows and Theo's music performances. Aisha started opening up, her drawings revealing a vivid imagination. One day, she gave Elias a picture of their family, for stick figures holding hands, with a rainbow overhead. "That's us," she said shyly. Elias framed it, hanging it beside Theo's cityscape. Their biggest test came unexpectedly. Theo's school hosted a family day, and some parents complained about Elias and Julian's presence, calling their family unnatural. Theo, fiercely loyal, got into a fight defending them, earning a suspension. At home, he exploded. "Why do people care who you love?" he shouted, his voice cracking. Elias sat him down, his own anger simmering but controlled. "They're scared of what they don't understand," he said. "But we don't live for them. We live for us." Julian added, "And you stood up for us. That's courage." Theo's suspension became a turning point. He started a school club for queer kids, finding his voice. Aisha's adoption hearing arrived in spring, a year after she'd joined them. The courtroom felt familiar now, its tension a known enemy. Aisha's biological parents had relinquished their rights long ago, making the process smoother, but Elias and Julian still held their breath. Aisha, clutching Maya's hand, smiled as the judge declared her officially their daughter. They celebrated with a picnic in Prospect Park, the same place where Elias and Julian's love had begun. Maya and Theo chased Aisha through the grass, and Elias leaned against Julian, the weight of their journey settling into something like peace. Years passed and their family grew stronger. Maya, at 16, won a citywide art contest, her work displayed in a gallery. Theo, 18, graduated high school and started community college, his guitar always close. Aisha, 12, thrived, her laughter a constant in their home. Elias and Julian, now in their late 30s, never stopped fostering. They took in another child, a quiet 8-year-old boy named Liam, and the cycle of love and struggle began anew. One evening, Elias found a letter in the mail, forwarded from an old address. It was from his father, the first contact in nearly 2 decades. "I've been watching from afar," it read. "I was wrong. I'm proud of the man you've become." Elias stared at the words, his chest tight. He didn't need them anymore, but they still mattered. He showed the letter to Julian, who squeezed his hand. "You've built something he could never understand," Julian said. Elias nodded, folding the letter away. Their story wasn't perfect. They faced judgment, financial strain, and the endless complexities of parenting kids with trauma. But they faced it together, their love a foundation that held firm. Elias, once rejected for being himself, had become a father to children the world had forgotten. He'd found purpose in their laughter, their growth, their trust. As he watched his family, Julian, Maya, Theo, Aisha, and now Liam, gathered around the dinner table, he knew this was the life he'd always wanted. Not just to be loved, but to give love, fiercely and without apology.